I appreciate this. I think is our fourth rally information session that we've done, and I actually get kind of excited in doing these because every time we do these, we seem to pick up a few more votes, and when people understand and hear kind of the impacts that these vetoes are having, both on the power plants, but also on the jobs, and also our natural resources, they get it. And once you get beyond the soundbite, you understand that this is a bigger issue than has been portrayed. The other thing that I think is important, and I think which was emblematic in the fact that you had Senator Gaida, Republican from Warren, you had Representative Smith, a Democrat from Hebron. This is a bipartisan bill. This is not a partisan bill. This is not a partisan issue. This is about jobs. This is about working in the woods, working in the mills, and doing what's right for our forest. So the vetoes occurred on 19th of June. As you heard earlier, that day, over $9 million worth of business transactions for equipment, chip vans, trucks, dead. They were done. Contractors said, we're walking away. It was the deal was contingent. These were inked deals. That was the kind of the first shot. What we've heard since, timber sales have been abandoned, where people said, look, Mr. Landowner, Mrs. Landowner, I don't have markets. I can't cut your woodlot. Sorry, give me a call later. Maybe if we have a market, I can do your work. I can't do it. Those have occurred. We've seen crews either downsize, or I'll hear regularly. I was at one of these rallies earlier, and a logger walked up to me and said, "Do you know why I'm here?" I said, "Well, you're here to support us." He goes, "Yes," but he said, "I'm also here because I'm not in the woods." He says, me and my crew, we're working 2 days a week because we have quota only. We can satisfy our quota in 2 days. So all summer long, my crew is getting an extended weekend, and he said that's payroll they're not receiving, that's wood that's not going to the mills. He says that's economic activity that is being lost. The other piece is, and I'm going to have Charlie Hansen get up here in a minute and talk about it. Out the back end of these power plants comes wood ash. Wood ash this is part of how this whole program's been integrated into our state's rural economy. This wood ash has become an important agricultural fertilizer for many of our farmers across the state. You don't burn wood, you don't make wood ash, and that's a problem. I like to regularly explain to people that New Hampshire is a timber state, and people look at me kind of funny and they think timber, they think of Oregon or Washington, but we're the second most forested state in the nation. We have an industry that is $1.4 billion. It's the third largest manufacturing industry. So when people say I support manufacturing, I hope they also remember that forest products is also a manufacturing industry, and it's a big industry, and a lot of it occurs outside of the Interstate 93 corridor. These are jobs in all corners of the state, and they're good paying jobs. They're jobs with benefits, they're good salaries. A couple other quick points, and then I'm going to let Charlie get up here and talk. 2/3 of all the timber that grows in New Hampshire is considered low grade. As I tell folks, we have beautiful trees. They're beautiful to look at, especially in October when the leaves are turning. But when you look at those trees, 2/3 of all that timber out there is low grade. If you don't have a market for that, you can't manage it. You can't manage it. That affects the landowner, but that also affects the sawmills and the solid wood businesses. We took a look at the timber tax records. 40% of all the timber cut in New Hampshire, this is saw logs, firewood, 40% is chipped and sent to an energy plant like this. You lose those energy plants, it leaves a gaping hole in our industry, and it will cripple us, plain and simple. As you heard earlier, the impetus for the vetoes was one of economics. It was about electricity rates. The math isn't there. And if you look at the record, if you look at the fiscal notes, the PUC did the analysis, the math, the numbers just don't add up. 446, the net metering bill, important to a lot of sawmills. The PUC in fact said that bill will actually lower rates by enabling businesses and communities to generate their own power. That can actually lower electric rates for ratepayers. When you look at 365, as you heard earlier, it's a 3-year bill. There's a 3-year, the number was 18 million a year for 3 years. You lose the power plants, we see a spike of 17 million, and that's forever. So it's very short-sighted to say these vetoes equal ratepayer savings. It is very short-sighted, and the numbers are there. It's been vetted, and it's distressing to see that continuously put in our face that these are subsidized, hurting the ratepayers. Because when you look at the facts, and that's what these rallies are about, is let's look at the facts. When you look at the facts, these are good for jobs, these are good for our forest, and they're also good for our utility grid and our rates.
Bridgewater is one of 6 biomass plants in the state that's affected by Senate Bill 365. We've been in operation since 1987. And without really kind of puffing things up, the biomass industry is probably one, and in New Hampshire, is probably one of the most compelling success stories in renewable power in the nation. The 6 plants have been in operation for 30 years. Bridgewater alone, in those 30 years, has bought more than $150 million worth of fiber. And all those dollars have stayed right here in the state of New Hampshire. We've spent over $50 million on direct wages and benefits that have stayed right here in New Hampshire. So it's an incredible industry, it's an incredible success story. And all the while, it benefited the forest and farm resources. Jason will speak a little bit later to the forest resources, and Charlie Hansen from Resource Management, Inc. will speak to the effects on the farm resources. Our employees and the employees of the support businesses, I like to say they are New Hampshire. They live here, they work here, they're community leaders, they're coaches, they work for nonprofits, they're on boards, they're church leaders. They are New Hampshire. And they spend their dollars in New Hampshire at New Hampshire businesses. We really think that the governor made a mistake, and he failed to look at the statewide breadth of the issue and the number of plants and the number of businesses that will be affected. He overlooked forest health and how that affects tourism. He overlooked the public and private collaboration on forest land and the impacts that has for access for snowmobiling, hunting, hiking, fishing. He overlooked equipment sales and the fees and taxes that are paid by not only the plants, but all the supporting industries. He completely ignored the benefit that local facilities have on transmission, distribution, and the ISO New England capacity markets. For those people who listened to testimony, we had an expert witness come in that said if 100 megawatts of biomass energy is lost and has to be replaced by 100 megawatts of new capacity, that New Hampshire's burden of that will be $17 million a year annually forever. He talks about a subsidy, and I'd like to rather describe our industry as an investment. Right up the street, Plymouth State University, an economic impact study was done in 2016. $254 million a year of annual economic impact just from the biomass industry alone, let alone the entire forest products industry. The bill will have a cost of $25 million. That's a 10-to-1 return on that investment. It makes good sense for New Hampshire, and I think he really made a mistake.
We have a three-legged stool in the North Country for the economic system. recreation, tourism, and forest products. And they are interdependent. And they impact businesses not only in the north, but also in the south part of the state. So there have been at least $9 million in canceled sales of major equipment purchases since the bill was vetoed. We're already starting to see that happen. If this bill is not overturned, I should say this veto is not overturned, the carnage that's going to ensue is going to be irreparable. We don't have industries to replace what we will lose. And so it is on us, voters, to make doggone sure that our elected representatives know they had better vote our way in September, or we're not voting their way in November. The North Country, I don't think, is going to be a problem. But people down south don't understand the impact this is going to have on their businesses and their communities and their electric rates. As Mike said, we'll save on face value $30 million. The fact of the matter is, that's for 3 years. We're going to lose $18 million a year in capacity charge increases and transmission and distribution charges in perpetuity. This is penny wise and pound foolish. The governor has made a mistake. We have the opportunity to fix that. And you fix it by picking up your phone and calling people that you know in the southern part of the state. I'm sure you've got friends, and you tell them to talk to their representatives. This is the way our government is supposed to work. When an injustice is being done for whatever reason, it's incumbent on us to rise to it. Our Constitution says we can revolt if we have to. Okay? Unique to the constitutions of the entire nation. This is a form of revolt against a bad decision. It's going to impact all of our lives, our families, our futures. I'm proud to be here. I'm humbled that you've honored me with the seat in the Senate, and you can be assured that I'm fighting for you. As a sponsor of both 129 2 years ago, that gave an extra couple of years of life, and a sponsor of 365, and as well 446. It's critically important that you know that I have gained 16 signatures, that's 2/3 of the Senate, on a letter telling the governor this is a mistake and he shouldn't have vetoed the bill. All right, I'm fairly comfortable that I can hold those 16 and maybe add a couple to it. I don't think the fight's going to be in the Senate. I think we have 400 members in the House, most of whom reside south of Concord. And those are where we need to apply our efforts. Make the phone calls. It's your livelihood. It's your family. It's your future. It's New Hampshire. Be certain that I'll be leading the charge in the Senate. I'm working with House members as well, as are everybody that's involved in this effort. But you need to do your part because you are the voters. This is your future. I will support you, and I thank you for the honor of serving.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you, Senator Guida, for your words of support for overriding the governor's veto. I think this is you all received at one of the other events a list of who voted for these bills and who voted in opposition to these bills. We passed it in the House by an overwhelming majority. So there is hope that we can sustain that, I think it's if we pick up 20 more people who supported the bills to begin with, we can override the veto quite easily. The governor has made a mistake. He has not looked at the whole picture. He is only looking at what one person or one organization has told him, and he has gotten bad information. It's really important to contact your state representatives and your senator to keep them on the straight and narrow path in the right direction. But you can call your state rep. Our phone numbers are our home numbers. Call us, thank us for our vote, ask us to override the veto. And for those who did not vote for these bills, it's really important to let them know your story, your personal story. Nothing affects a state legislator like personal stories from their own constituents. So thank you for being here. This is a great day, great turnout. Thanks to all the people who I've worked with that are in the audience, my forester, my tree cutting people, I saw them pull in a little bit ago, and all my fellow legislators and candidates too. Thank you.
I'm Charlie Hansen from Resource Management. I've had the good fortune of managing the wood ash that comes out of this plant and many others for over 30 years. And a lot of people don't think about the ash end of things. The ash program has been extremely successful, and fact, it's what we consider one of our most successful products. Most of the ash that's generated in the state at the other biomass plants goes as a potassium fertilizer on farm fields. Right now, 2 of the other plants that are shut down that we work with, we have orders backed up. We have farmers asking, hey, when can I get my wood ash? Well, if there's no wood ash, it's kind of hard to get it to you. So farms that have come to rely on this as a natural, local resource. I'm a nutrient guy too, and it's the only local source of potassium in the region. And we make it right here. As Jason says, this is local power, and it's right soup to nuts. The interesting thing too that's come about over the last couple months is starting to really see some of the unintended consequences of where a reduced ash availability is having on other markets. For example, the ash that's produced at this facility is unique. It's the only one in the whole region that makes a very high carbon type of wood ash. That wood ash does not go to farm fields, hasn't for 25 years. Where it's gone mainly is to compost facilities to control odor. So for example, this is how it's starting to affect other communities. The city of Claremont, New Hampshire has used wood ash for many, many years. The city of Claremont composts their solids at their wastewater treatment plant. They also were taking in Sunapee and Bellows Falls, 2 local communities to them, to make for a cost-effective solution. When the ash supply got tight, Claremont got nervous and said, hey, we got to take care of our own. They kicked out Sunapee and they kicked out Bellows Falls. That all of a sudden dropped in Sunapee's lap, in their case. It tripled their cost for removing the solids from the wastewater treatment plant. We're just starting to get the tip of the iceberg of some of these unintended consequences, but there are definitely going to be more if this continues. So the governor got it wrong. Let's stand up. Let's get our reps to do the right thing. I thank you all you reps for coming today and supporting us in our endeavor. And let's just get it done.
So SB 365, which would ensure the plants have a threshold of access to the power grid, which they don't necessarily have now. So that's going to cost about $18 million a year for 3 years. The offset of that is that if these plants go out, we're going to see about a $17 or $18 million increase in perpetuity because we'll have less capacity to draw from on our electric grid in New Hampshire, and that's a simple fact. So that first bill, 365, allows access to the market by these plants. The second bill is the net metering bill, which is 446, SB 446. And that, in layman's terms, is the ability of people who have a cogeneration, a small hydro plant, or if they're burning chips for cogeneration at, say, a sawmill, they're capped at 3/4 of a meg that they can put onto the system, and that would allow them to up that to 5 meg onto the system. And the independent study on that bill actually shows that bill reducing electric rates going forward because it diversifies the access to the grid. So those are 2 very important bills.
When this plant is shutting down, it affects like all sorts of ancillary industries as well. And it's not just the loggers that go out and make chips for these plants. It's also the parts people that make parts for the logging equipment, for the truckers, the diesel fuel that's being sold to haul the chips around. I mean, we're talking about the ash that's produced in this plant, and the fact that RMI, a neighboring town in Holderness, they can't remarket the ash. And we find out that the ash is also being used in other regards for composting, sewage, treatment. So it's a lot of things are affected by the two bills that got vetoed.
The message I've been trying to get across about these plants, not only the economics, but in terms of working in the woods, the ability to do the proper harvesting techniques on our forests is tremendously hampered by not having this resource to be able to get rid of that low-grade material. It also is an issue with the towns in terms of some decreased tax revenue from the timber taxes, because even if you didn't chip, it sometimes means you you can't do the entire job. So there's a lost revenue there in terms of the towns to timber tax, lost revenue to landowners. And just really, it's a forest health issue, and being able to do good silviculture in the woods, which is really dependent on having these low-grade markets.
I said this is essentially a threat, an existential threat to a way of life that's been in our state for 200 plus years. Putting aside the initial economic impact, okay, we have to look at the potential for the human carnage. Right? You lose 1,000 direct jobs between trucking and logging and the plants themselves. That's going to impact the families. That's going to translate to stress on families. Right? And that, as we know, we studied this through the last 4 years, right? Mental health issues, substance abuse issues, marital stress, all those things are going to create a real mess because we don't have anything to replace these jobs or this industry up north. Very fragile three-legged stool, recreation, tourism, and forest products. Been in a really good symbiosis for 50 years at least, and now that's all jeopardized because on face value, okay, the governor says we're going to save money on electricity rates, failing to consider not only the human impact, but in the rates themselves, the fact that this is going to incur additional transmission and distribution costs for the 100 megawatts we lose, as well as capacity charge increases, specifically stated to be $17 million a year for the capacity that we are losing in New Hampshire that has to be added in other states. So this is much more than just a soundbite. This is a threat to families, to futures, and to our way of life. And so accordingly, I'm leading the charge in the Senate along with Senator Bradley, and we have been successful in gaining 16 signatures on a letter asking the governor to not veto. We're working to maintain those, perhaps increase that number, and we're working very actively with the House members to A, get them to show up, and B, get them to do what's right for New Hampshire.
Many of my landowners keep their land open to recreation through the current use program. And one of the reasons they're able to do that is because they have the ability to get periodic income from a timber harvest. And if that kind of goes away, we're really, we're not putting it out as a threat because you don't want that to be the situation, but landowners are really thinking twice about exposing themselves to having their land used without any kind of return. And then also when you consider just what a timber sale does in the woods, it provides access to the forest. And that access is often used by hikers and mountain bikers and sometimes some more organized recreational activities as well. So it's really a kind of a double-edged sword when you talk about recreation.
I said I'm cautiously optimistic that the Senate gets it. The vast majority of House members voted the right way. This is going to come down to who shows up on September 13th, okay, and our ability with the citizens to exert the pressure they need on their representatives to say, look, this is much more than saving money. This is going to cost money in perpetuity. It's going to harm lives. It's going to harm the economics. It's going to harm the ecosystem. All of those are negatives that far outweigh the potential for saving, a couple of bucks on your electricity bill.